Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. I'm so very excited for today's video and to recommend you guys some books that I think are perfect to read during the summer. It's getting warmer where I live, the pools are opening up. I hope that's the case for wherever you may be. If not, I feel like these books are gonna get you in the summer mood. Whatever your plans may be, if you're going to the beach, going on a vacation, or if you're just chilling at home, these books I feel are gonna be the perfect summer escape. Summer is my very favorite season in general, but also just my favorite season for reading because I love the warm weather. I love reading by the water, and I think these books are all perfect to do that. But like I said, if you don't have plans this summer, I feel like these books just have the best summer vibes that are going to be the perfect escape no matter what you're doing over the next season. So I hope you guys get some good recommendations from today's video. I have lots of great books to talk about. Let's just jump right in. We're starting out strong with one of my very favorite authors. She's widely beloved, so I feel like she's a lot of people's favorite author as well. All of her books I would say are good for summer, but I'm going to recommend you guys my two very favorites by her that I feel give off the most summer energy. The first one being People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I love and adore this book so much. It is my #1 very favorite Emily Henry book. It's a 6-star read for me, and I think it is so perfect to read during the summertime. So basically in this book we're following Poppy and Alex, and we get past and present timelines. It flips back and forth every other chapter. So in the past we're seeing that they became friends in college. We're kind of seeing their friendship develop, and then the way they maintained their friendship over the years, even if they didn't see each other, was that they would always go on this week-long vacation together every single summer. And then in the present timeline we're seeing that their friendship isn't as strong as it once was. They haven't really talked in a while, and they haven't gone on their yearly vacation in a few years. So it's also this suspenseful subplot trying to figure out what tore them apart, why they aren't friends anymore, and why they haven't gone on their vacations in a while. And my very favorite part of this book, aside from Poppy and Alex's relationship and seeing it develop and grow, is seeing all these vacations they go on. And one thing I love about it is they don't just go on super summery tropical type vacations. You also get to see them go in cold weather climates. They go on international trips, just things outside of their comfort zone, things that you wouldn't think of being necessarily like an ideal vacation, but it's just so fun to see them in all these different environments, see them on all these different trips together, and watch the way their friendship grows over the years through these vacations. It is just the perfect summer read. I took this book with me on a vacation, and now I associate that trip with this book, and it just made it so special. So I feel like if you're going on a vacation this summer, this would be the perfect book to bring along with you, or if you're not and you're wanting that escapism, this book is also perfect for that as well. I also want to recommend you guys Funny Story by Emily Henry. This is her latest release that came out in April, and it is a very close second in terms of being my favorite Emily Henry book. The premise is so unique and so fun for this book. So we're following Daphne and Miles, and they both get broken up with by their long-term partners, and both of their long-term partners end up dating one another. So Daphne's ex-fiance is now dating Miles's ex-girlfriend. They were childhood friends who claimed there was nothing romantic between them, but obviously there was, because now they're together. So Daphne is essentially getting kicked out of the home she shared with her ex-fiance. Miles's ex-girlfriend is moving out, so Daphne needs somewhere to live. Miles needs a roommate. She ends up moving in with Miles, and then it becomes kind of this fake dating trope because they're trying to show their exes that they're doing much better and they've moved on after both going through these horrible breakups together. This book actually does take place over the course of this summer, and I absolutely loved and adored this couple and seeing their relationship grow. Like I just said, the premise is so fun and so unique, and it made for such an interesting storyline. This and People We Meet on Vacation I feel are Emily Henry's two most rom-com-y books, which to me gives the most summery vibes, and I do prefer her more rom-com-y books because I prefer when the focus in her books is on the romance and doesn't have a super heavy familial emotional subplot. There is a little bit of that in both of these books I recommended, but I feel it's just enough to give layers and depth to the characters and story, and not enough to take away from the main romance plotline, which I absolutely love. This book gives great summer vibes. It takes place kind of off the coast of Michigan. We see a few scenes of them going to the beach together. There is a winery involved where Miles works. Just so many things in this book give me such great summer vibes, and it's just such a fun, fluffy rom-com with the perfect amount of depth. I feel like this would be the perfect beach or pool read for the summer. If you're an Emily Henry fan and you have not yet picked up an Abby Jimenez book, I feel like you would love one if you love the other. They are very similar to me, and I highly recommend Part of Your World by her as a great read for the summer. In this book, we're following Alexis and Daniel, and they come from very different worlds, hence the title. Daniel comes from this small town. He's more of like a country boy. He kind of lives off the land. He grows his own food. He cooks. He takes care of animals. He runs this bed and breakfast. Whereas Alexis is very much a city girl. She is a doctor, and she has these very high expectations placed on her by her family in terms of what her life should look like, what type of career she's expected to have, and the kind of family she should have. There's also an age gap between Daniel and Alexis, with Alexis being a bit older than Daniel, which I really liked, that kind of reverse age gap trope where the woman in the story is older. They're also opposites in terms of personality. I would say Alexis is more black cat, Daniel is very much golden retriever, and I just absolutely loved them. I read this book a little after or before summer, and I remember while reading it I was thinking that this is the perfect summer read. Some of the dates they go on, especially when they're back in Daniel's small town, felt so summery and so cute. I loved the scenes at the bed and breakfast. It was just so adorable. I loved their relationship. I loved this kind of opposites attract dynamic that they had, and I think this is again such a great rom-com with the perfect amount of depth to the story and to the characters to pick up and read this summer. The next rom-com I have to recommend is Wildfire by Hannah Grace. This is the book that follows Icebreaker, and they are interconnected standalones. Normally I would say definitely read books in a series in order, even if they are interconnected and could be standalones technically, but in this case I feel like this is a perfect example of this book you definitely could read even if you haven't read Icebreaker yet, because it takes place in a completely different setting and it does feel a bit removed from book one, so you're not going to feel like you're missing out in terms of book one setting up this world and setting and characters and stuff like that. It does reference the characters from book one and kind of where the couple ended up at the end of Icebreaker, but I mean it's a romance, so I feel like it's not really a spoiler to know that they end up together at the end. All that rambling to say, I feel like you can read this without reading Icebreaker. So Wildfire follows Russ and Aurora. Russ is one of the hockey players on the team that we met in book one, and then Aurora is also a student at this same college. They end up meeting at a college party kind of at the end of the year when they're all about to leave for the summer, and Russ and Aurora have a one-night stand, and then turns out they both are camp counselors together working at this summer camp where there's a very strict no fraternization policy, so it's this weird forced proximity situation, and we see things develop from there. And this book, of course, it takes place at a summer camp. It's the perfect summery setting. This book I would say is definitely more like a fluffy type rom-com. It did touch on some heavier topics, but to me it wasn't done in a super deep heavy way. It did feel more just like a fluffy cutesy rom-com to me. Some of the dates they go on in this book are so cute. They feel so summery. All the summer camp activities they do, just the perfect summer vibes in this book. Another rom-com I want to recommend that is all fluff is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. This book follows this socialite influencer type gal named Piper. One day her partying ways get a bit out of hand, so her stepfather is like, hey, you need a reality check, and sends her off to this fishing town to renovate the bar that her late father kind of ran there. And it is there where she ends up meeting this very grumpy fisherman named Brendan, and they could not be more different, and it follows their relationship. And this one is very fluffy, cutesy rom-com, a lot of spice in this one, so keep that in mind before picking this one up. I haven't had the best luck with other Tessa Bailey books, but I did really enjoy this one by her. This one has remained my favorite. The fact that it takes place in summer, as the title says, in this fishing town, it just gives off very summery vibes, and it is a fun light rom-com. You don't have to think too hard when you're reading this one. There's nothing super deep about it, but it is just an enjoyable story. The next romance I want to recommend is a little bit more emotional and deep, and that is Every Summer After by Carly Fortune, and it's very similar in plot structure to People We Meet on Vacation, where we have past and present timelines. In this book we follow Percy and Sam. In the past we're seeing Percy and Sam as they grew up together in these neighboring lake houses, and their relationship kind of developed over the summers that they got to spend together, from a friendship to more of a romance. And then in the present day, something is bringing them back to the same lake town, but you see that their relationship has completely torn apart and it's not at all what it was, so we're trying to figure out what happened that tore them apart. This book got compared so much to Love in Other Words, but I actually preferred this one a bit more. I know a lot of people don't like the ending and the reason why they stopped talking, and I think it's completely valid. But in my mind, when I was in the characters' heads, I could just kind of understand why they did what they did and why they felt the way they felt. So it didn't bother me the way it did some people, but keep that in mind before picking this one up. You might want to check trigger warnings if there are certain things you're sensitive to. This one was just a perfect summer setting. I really loved the romance in this. Childhood friends to strangers to lovers is my very favorite trope. It just hits every time. The summery lakeside setting was perfect and it gave the perfect summer vibes, so I highly recommend reading this one this summer. On a very similar note is The Infinity Between Us by N.S. Perkins. This one's on Kindle Unlimited, so I did read it on my Kindle. I literally read this one in like one sitting last summer on the beach. I absolutely loved it. It read so quickly. In this book, we're following Will and Violet, and again, we get past and present timelines. In the past, Will's family and Violet's family spent their summers together at this beach house. We get to see Violet and Will's relationship over the course of this one summer kind of turn from friends to something a little bit more romantic. But in the present, we see that these two families have not spent their summers at this beach house in a while. Will and Violet haven't spoken in a while. Violet is actually getting ready to sell the beach house when they end up running into one another there again. So it's that suspenseful subplot of trying to figure out what tore them apart. I really liked the way the suspenseful subplot was done in this one because there's kind of multiple things impacting the relationship and you don't really know what happened. So it made for a really fast read because I was just flipping the pages with so much anticipation. I needed to know what was going to happen, and it was so interesting to uncover multiple different things along the way that impacted this relationship. Again, it takes place at a beach house over this summer, so perfect summer read. Next, I have a YA romance trilogy to recommend you guys. It is The Summer I Turned Pretty trilogy. The first book is by far my favorite, but I think the whole trilogy is worth reading in its entirety. If you haven't watched the show, if you have watched the show, I still recommend reading these books. I think the books are better than the show in my opinion, but a lot of people prefer the show. So if you read the books and you haven't yet watched the show, you might enjoy one or the other or both, but they are the perfect summer vibes. In these books, we're following this young girl named Belly, and every summer she has gone to the beach with her mom and her mom's best friend, and her mom's best friend has these two boys, Conrad and Jeremiah, and they've always grown up as friends. They've kind of had crushes on one another throughout the years, but this summer the boys are kind of taking note of Belly. They've all kind of grown up a little bit, so it becomes this whole love triangle situation of like, who likes Belly, which boy does Belly like, who is she gonna choose? And it is a little bit juvenile at times, but I just loved Jenny Han's writing so much. It felt so nostalgic. These books were so easy to read. I literally read each of them at the pool in like almost a day. They just went by so quickly and I just had the best time with them. I think they're the best summer vibes. Again, take place at a beach, and just the romance, it reads so quick. Such a perfect summer read. I next want to recommend you guys a series, and that is the Chestnut Spring series by Elsie Silver. These are cowboy romances, but if that scares you, don't let it, because I was so skeptical. I was the kind of person that was like a country music hater, but now look at me. I went to Nashville earlier this month for a country concert, and it was all thanks to this book series. If you're skeptical, don't be. Pick it up, give it a try. It could change your life like it changed mine. These books all take place in this fictional small town of Chestnut Springs in Canada on this ranch. It just gives the most summery vibes, just working on the ranch, the cowboys. Each book follows a different brother or person in this family friend group and their romance, and each book has different tropes as well. My personal favorites in the series are book 2, which is Heartless, and book 3, which is Powerless, followed very closely by book number 4, which is Reckless. So there are 5 books total in this series. I would recommend all of them. They're all great. I feel like there's something for absolutely everyone in this series, and I feel like they would be perfect to binge this summer. If you've not yet read Chestnut Springs, give it a try this summer. Another cowboy romance to recommend you guys if you have read the Chestnut Springs series and are looking for more cowboy romance, or if you haven't and just want to dip your toe in the water, Done and Dusted by Lila Sage I feel like would be a good one to pick up. This book follows Emmy and Luke, and Emmy is a horse rider, but something ended up happening that she is moving back to her small town for a little bit to kind of get away. She ends up crashing with her best friend who still lives there, and she's kind of trying to stay under the radar a little bit. She doesn't really want to open up to her family about why she's there, but she ends up running into Luke, who is her brother's best friend. friend. They haven't seen each other in a while, but when they see each other, it's kind of like things have changed for them. They have this attraction, and it was just a really good time. It was very light. It wasn't anything too deep or too crazy, but it was a very quick and easy read. And again, just the small town, cowboy, ranch vibes give me all the summertime feelings. I next have a couple thrillers to recommend you guys. The first one is The Family Next Door by Sally Hepworth, and this is not a super heavy, dark thriller at all. It is just the perfect amount of mystery and suspense that makes it light enough to be a good beach pool summer read. In this book, we're following these 3 suburban women. They all kind of have different family dynamics, different lifestyles, but they're all keeping secrets. And we see them together, we see them individually, but the main event that happens is this new woman moves into the neighborhood, and her life looks a lot different than these 3 women's lives. So they are very curious about her. They find her a little bit peculiar. They want to know what her story is, what her deal is, and there's lots of things that they end up uncovering about this new neighbor, and their own secrets start coming out. And I just absolutely loved and adored this book so much. Something about like the suburban setting and the moms and the families just gave me summer vibes. It just kind of reminded me of like growing up in a neighborhood and doing like family things. Even though you're seeing like the drama from adults' perspectives, something about it just gave me that summery vibe, and I think it's such a quick, easy read that's gonna keep your interest the whole time. That would be so perfect to read for the summer. The next thriller I have to recommend you guys is The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. This one is the perfect summer setting because it takes place at a summer camp. Our main character in this book that we're following is Emma, and she attended this summer camp, and while she was there, the 3 girls that she was bunking with mysteriously went missing. So it was this huge notorious story that got widespread attention. The camp ended up shutting down, and then we flash to the present where Emma is a bit older and she is being asked to be a camp counselor at this same camp because it is finally reopening. There's kind of some controversy surrounding the opening, and when she goes back to the camp, weird things start happening again. Things are uncovered, and once again, people at this camp go missing. So the best summer vibes, if you've never read a Riley Sager book, his books are really enjoyable. I always really enjoy the characters in his books. I feel like sometimes thrillers focus more on like the storyline and the plot, and there's not a whole lot of character development, but I never feel that way in a Riley Sager book. I think he does both characters and plot really, really well. This reminded me a lot of that American Horror Story season with the 80s summer camp, same kind of vibes, perfect for the summertime. The next book I want to recommend, I know it is very popular, but I think it's perfect for summer if you've not yet read it, and that is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This book is kind of a few different genres blended together. It's mystery, historical fiction, and then a little bit of romance as well. In this book, we get 2 different timelines. So one of the timelines takes place in the 1950s, and we're following our main character, Kaya. And she had a very bad upbringing. She came from a very poor family. She ends up being abandoned by pretty much all of her family members and having to just try and survive and make it on her own. She has to figure out how to live, how to eat, how to make money. She is just scrounging by for the majority of her life. The townspeople in the surrounding town know her as the Marsh Girl because she really just lives off the marsh, lives off the land in this little shack. And then in our other timeline, it takes place about 10 years later, and we see that the town's golden boy has been murdered. So that's all I'm gonna say. We find out how these 2 timelines converge, and like I said, this book has mystery, historical fiction, and a little bit of romance, and I absolutely loved it. I feel like Kaya is one of the most interesting main characters I've ever read about. This marshy setting in North Carolina and how descriptive this book was make it perfect for summer, and I just really, really loved reading this one on the beach. The next book I want to recommend is Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. This book is also kind of a few genres blended together. I would say it's mostly literary fiction with a little bit of mystery and a tiny bit of romance, but in this book we get 3 different perspectives. The main perspective we're getting is of this older woman named Tova, and her husband has passed away. Her son went missing mysteriously out at sea a few years back, and so she's feeling a little bit lonely in her older age. She ends up getting a job at this aquarium as the cleaning lady, and she really feels at peace at this job. She She ends up having this unexpected little friendship with this octopus in one of the exhibits at the aquarium, and you also get the perspective of this octopus in the book. And then you also get a third perspective from a young man, and we're kind of trying to figure out how all of these perspectives intertwine. And I absolutely love this book so much. It takes place in the Pacific Northwest, so you get a lot of scenes by the water. I feel like the aquarium setting too just feels so summery to me, and this book was very, very entertaining. I actually listened to this one on audio, and I would highly recommend the audiobook if you're interested because it was very well narrated. The next book I want to recommend, I also would recommend the audiobook of. I listened to this one very recently. It's narrated by Meryl Streep, and she does an incredible job. Her storytelling is just so captivating and made this book really come to life, and I feel like I definitely enjoyed it more listening to it. I don't know if I would have liked it as much had I read it physically, but that's Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. In this book, we're following these three sisters who are home for the summer, and they're working on their family's cherry farm in Michigan. And while they're working and just throughout their day, their mother is recounting the story of her childhood to them and her youth as she was an actress and had these acting jobs. And she ended up working alongside this man who went on to become a very famous actor, and she actually dated him for a time. This book was the quintessential summer setting. The whole time I was listening to this book, I could not stop thinking about how perfect it would be for the summertime. Just the setting of the cherry farm, the scenes we get at Tom Lake where the mother had an acting job there and they literally went swimming in the lake every chance that they got. They would like run from their acting gig, tear off their clothes, put on their swimsuit, and run straight into the lake, and it was just the best summertime vibes. Loved the setting of this and absolutely loved Meryl Streep's narration. The next book I want to recommend you guys is literary fiction, again with a little bit of romance, and that is Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellers. In this book, we follow Cleo, who is this young woman in her 20s. She's studying art in New York, but she's from the UK, so she's here on a student visa, but her visa is about to expire. And that's when she ends up meeting Frank, who is a bit older than her. He is in his 40s, and he's a well-established businessman. They end up striking up a romance and falling in love, and they kind of impulsively decide to get married since Cleo's student visa is about to expire. Frank decides to marry her to help her out, and it's kind of like a green card marriage, but also they actually are in love with one another. And you see their relationship both through their perspectives, but also through the perspectives of some of their friends, some of their family members. And the reason I recommend this one for summer, it doesn't necessarily all take place during the summer. It takes place over the course of a few years, and you get to see all seasons. But I just feel like this book is such a romp. It takes place in New York. It's such a fun time. I remember at the end they go on a trip to Italy, and that gave me summer vibes. I just feel like the vibes and the subject matter of this book just feel summery to me. Definitely check trigger warnings because there are some heavier things in this book. But Coco Mellers' writing is just so beautiful. There are so many great quotes in this book. I remember I read it over the summer, and I just absolutely loved reading it during that time. I have two Taylor Jenkins Reid books to recommend you guys. The first one is actually with my mom because I let her borrow it. She is currently reading it, but it is my very favorite book by her, and that is Carrie Soto is Back. In this book, we're following this retired tennis player named Carrie Soto. She has won so many titles and awards over the course of her career, and she holds a lot of records in tennis. But you see there's this younger up-and-coming tennis star who is about to take some of Carrie's records away from her. So Carrie gets really motivated, doesn't want that to happen, and decides to come out of retirement, train. Her dad is going to be her coach, and she wants to be the best again and reclaim her titles and records. I loved following Carrie in this book. It's very much a character study. If a book about tennis doesn't interest you, it doesn't feel super heavy on the tennis. It's more so about Carrie and her relationship with her father and her life, and there are so many great themes in this book, and I so enjoyed it. I feel like this book is good for summer because, I don't know, I feel like it's tennis girl summer. I don't know if you guys have been getting those TikToks of like the tennis aesthetic, but they are all over my For You page. I feel like with the Challengers movie coming out, it's just the vibe for the summer. And I don't know, with Wimbledon in July, the US Open being in September, tennis has always just given me summer vibes, and I just love this book so much. So any excuse to recommend it, but I do think this one is great to read during the summertime. The next Taylor Jenkins Reid book I want to recommend you guys is One True Loves. I have read so many of her books, but the only two I've given 5 stars to are Carrie Soto and this one. So they are my two very favorites that I do think are perfect to read during the summer. In this book, we're following our main character, Emma. She ends up marrying her high school sweetheart, her soulmate, the love of her life. But a few years into their marriage, she ends up getting a call one day while he's away for a work trip, ship that her husband's helicopter went down in a crash and he is presumed dead. And I promise that's not a spoiler. You literally find that out on like page 2 of the book. So she is grieving the loss of her husband, but she ends up being able to pick up the pieces, move forward with her life, and she ends up reconnecting with another guy who she knew in high school but was just friends with. Now in the present, they end up forming a more romantic connection and they end up getting engaged. While she's engaged to this new man, she gets a call that her presumed dead husband is not actually dead. He's alive and he's coming home to her. So it's like, which man is she gonna choose? It is the most impossible decision. This book doesn't necessarily take place only in the summer. It spans the course of many years and takes place over all seasons. But I feel like just how addictive this book is to read. I was flipping the page with so much anticipation. I needed to know what guy she was gonna pick and who she would end up with and what was gonna happen. Just the fast-paced nature of this book to me feels like a very summery read. Also, one of the characters in this book is a swimmer, so at the beginning we get so many scenes of like the pool and them swimming, and that gave me very summery vibes too. I was thinking when I was reading it how it would be a good pool read, so highly recommend this one. I really enjoyed it. It read so quickly and I think it would be such a good one to read for the summer. And the last book I have to recommend you guys is a YA fiction book, and that is Mary Jane by Jessica Anya Blau. This book takes place, I believe, in the 1970s, and we're following this young girl named Mary Jane, and she comes from a very conservative, strict household. She's pretty religious. She ends up getting a babysitting job for the summer, and her mom thinks it's such a great opportunity because she's babysitting the daughter of this doctor. But when she gets there, she sees that their lifestyle is very different to how she's used to at her home. They are a lot more progressive than what she's used to at home. They're not really rigid. They don't really abide by a strict schedule. They're not super religious. So this is very much a coming of age story where Mary Jane kind of learns to think for herself, form her own opinions. It takes place over the course of this one summer. So there's scenes of them going to the beach together. I love this one so much. It was such a fun read, but also very sweet, and I thought it had really great messages in it. I also felt like it dealt with more sensitive topics in such a delicate way. I just loved the way it was done. So those are all the books that I have to recommend you guys. I hope you took away at least one recommendation from this video. Let me know if you have any fun summer plans. If you want to recommend me any books for the summer, I would love that so much. If you did enjoy the video and you got a good recommendation, be sure to give the video a thumbs up and like it. If you're not already subscribed, be sure to hit the red button down below to stick around so you don't miss out on any of my future book videos. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you so soon in my next video. Bye guys.